Right, so Dave, don't mind me starting off. You are the UK's comic laureate.
That's right.
What does that involve? Do you get a nice hat or a badge?
You'd think, wouldn't you? No, they did. The guy who organised it all, he set up this charity called Comics Literacy Awareness. The idea being to take comics into schools to cultivate a joy of reading amongst school children. And they asked me if I would be the spokesman, and then somebody came up with the idea of calling me the Comics Laureate, which has been great from the point of view of publicity, because lots of newspapers and radio stations and TV stations think, oh, this is a funny thing. It's like the Poet Laureate, but it's comics. And the guy who organised it, he did get his sister, who's a seamstress, to make me a cape. So it's a bit like a cosplay cape, but it's in lovely sky blue and sort of orange lining, so I don't wear it a lot. But so I just basically go and talk to schools and talk to librarians and just generally promote comics.
Like the Poet Laureate, do you write and you draw and stuff? Do you do comics for national occasions or stuff? Or?
No, that somebody did suggest that, but I don't know that I've got the time to, because you can write a poem. I mean, anybody can write a poem. I've wandered lonely as a but drawing a comic, that's serious business. So, but I've got about another 6 or 7 months to run till next February, and then somebody else is going to take over. But it has been an honour, but it hasn't changed my life in any great sort of wardrobe way.
You come up to Dundee a few times, don't you, for the art space up there? Is that part of the laureate thing?
No, that's not part of the laureate thing. That's part of something which I'm equally, in fact, I don't want to say more proud of, is that they made me an honorary doctor at the University of Dundee, because they have a comic art course up there, a degree comic art course. And I won't go into all the details, but I've got quite a connection with Dundee. My grandfather was a customs officer, and he was stationed in Dundee at the port. And my dad grew up there and got to know an artist who worked for D.C. Thompson, the publishers of all the comics up there. And he sort of got my dad interested in drawing. And I've got a paint box that this guy gave to my dad. And so there's always been this connection. And the very first professional work that I did was actually for D.C. Thompson, and they taught me the real nuts and bolts of how to draw comics and how to show what you need to show to tell the story. So yeah, that's how the Dundee thing came about. And last year they took me and my wife up there, and I stood on stage in my doctor's gown, it's all gowns and capes, and they had a lovely black tie dinner and a garden party, and we just had a fantastic time. We were treated so well. So it's a similar connection, but not quite the same.
I can imagine that the British comics industry is very much geared towards the artists and the creators, kind of like knowing about the industry and really kind of grounding them in terms of like what actually the business of putting together comics, hitting deadlines, especially with the amount of output that is generated in the comics industry. Certainly back in the 70s with 2018, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's a variation from like the American thing, where it's all more the kind of like the auteur kind of?
Well, I mean, the thing about doing comics is, if you look at the people, say, of my kind of generation who do comics, you find half of them went to art school and half of them didn't. And the ones who did go to art school ended up doing comics despite going to art school. And I don't really feel I miss much by not going to art school. I'm self-taught, and the real problem is the technicalities of comics. It's so hard to find those out. And I was able to hang around the offices in London and look over people's shoulder and get to know people in the business, and eventually be given odd little things to do, and eventually do more and more and prove myself to be reliable. But what they provide at Dundee is really a hands-on of how to do comics. So they teach you all the techniques. Yeah. They'll teach you about deadlines. They'll teach you about, again, the nuts and bolts of it. Funny enough, I was talking to somebody yesterday who's been over to a place called SCAD, which is the Savannah College of Art and Design, which is the best equipped comics university in the world. And apparently they're really hard there. If they give you an assignment, a coursework assignment, you're 5 minutes late, they cut your marks by 25% for being 5 minutes late. So, it's not really quite as harsh as that in comics. But these are the
I don't know. I've read enough sort of like comments and tweets where they've just turned and said, well, the editors, it's really, okay, you can draw and you can't draw, you can write, you can't write. You don't get the work done.
Yeah.
then it's really
Well,
kind of-
well, of course, the thing we say in the business is, do you want it good or do you want it Tuesday? You know, and the other little pearl of wisdom, if that is a pearl of wisdom, but a pearl of wisdom that I'll give you about that, I will say there are 3 qualities you need to succeed in comics, and if you've got any 2 of these, you'll probably be okay. You've got to be really good. If you're really good, you can get away with anything. Next one is you've got to be really reliable, because you might not be so good, but at least if they get the work on time.
Yeah.
And also, it doesn't hurt to be a nice guy or girl, because if you're pleasant to deal with, they're likely to give you it. So if you're really horrible to deal with, but you're good and on time, then that's fine. So
have you met anybody in the industry which doesn't quite meet up to those 3 requirements?
well, no, but then
No mentioning those.
Well, you tend to find they don't last that long, and particularly, as you say, if they can't fill the pages, if you let an editor down really badly, he's not going to use you again. So, yeah, that's how that works.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Cool. I'm making a documentary for Channel 4 about superheroes.
Okay.
And we're going to cover the Watchmen. So do you mind if I ask you a couple of Watchmen questions? Good. So, what were you setting out to achieve when you and Alan Moore started playing the...
We wanted to do the best comic book that had ever been published, the Citizen Kane of comics, something that would enshrine our names in glory forever and give us the recognition and fame that we richly deserved from an early age.
And a nice paycheck.
But actually...
No. What we set out to do was just do a comic that would be the comic that we would like to read. And we'd known each other for about 5 years. We were quite good friends by the time we started. And in a way, it was just a wonderful lark. We both love comics. John Higgins, who did the colouring, was a friend of mine as well. And it really was like a little cottage industry. It was published by DC, but Alan would send me the script. I'd do the drawings. I'd send them to John. John would show me the colouring. The whole lot would just be bundled off to DC. So we just wanted to do, as I say, something that we would enjoy reading, that engaged our intelligence at the age we were then, which was in our sort of early 30s or so. And that was, everything that happened after that was far beyond anything we could have dreamt of, and far beyond anything we could have planned. And the fact that I'm still being asked questions about a comic that I did 30 years ago is just amazing. So, yeah.
The characters obviously were based off of previous IPs or previous.
Yeah.
I hate that.
Yeah.
I hate that term.
Yeah.
Was there an idea prior to being supplied with this box of tools, this box of characters, or was that the jumping point? Was that the?
Well, I'd actually got to work for American Comics slightly before Alan, and we tried to pitch a couple of ideas to DC. One of which was the Challengers of the Unknown, who were their sort of Ghostbusters or something. And Alan came up with this wonderful story idea that DC would have bitten his arm off for it after Watchmen, that involved the whole DC universe and a conspiracy and a mystery and worlds changing and all this kind of thing. But before we could send the pitch in, they said, "Oh no, we've already promised those characters to someone else. So, Alan, we can't do that." Then he did a treatment for John Johns, Manhunter from Mars, set in the 50s when the communist witch hunts were on, and flying saucers, and this town knew there was a Martian there, or thought there was a Martian there, so they assigned John Jones, the detective, to sort it out. But of course, John Jones was in fact the Martian in his Earth disc. So it would have been a wonderful thing about. Oh, sorry, no, we promised John Jones to somebody else. And then they asked Alan, who by that time had done Swamp Thing, if he'd like to do something with a group of characters that had been published by Charlton Comics. So they said, yeah, and originally that's how we envisioned it. But then they said, well, we paid a lot of money to buy these characters, and you're going to kill them off or paint them in a bad light. So maybe you come up with some new characters, which we did, and which was actually a great release, because then we could completely forget about the previous continuity. The Charlton characters were sort of archetypes. There was the kind of military hero, and there was the millionaire playboy thrill seeker, and there was the Superman, and so we actually found that what we were given, what we had, was more or less all the archetypes of comic book characters. So we created them from the ground up, and I was actually able to get a character of mine called Night Owl. He was a character I came up with when I was about 12 years old, and used to draw him in my maths rough book. So yeah, so they weren't really based on the Charlton characters, but they filled the space that those characters left.
Okay.
The Watchmen universe is actually, I mean, obviously hugely important to the development of comics, but is coming back now in the DC Rebirth. They've been hinting at the appearance of Dr. Manhattan as a villain.
I wouldn't make the question too long, because all I'm going to say is no comment.
I was going to ask, but have you been asked or even consulted on it?
I have
Did
no
anyone
comment.
drop you an email?
No, they didn't.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay.
And that's all I'm going to say.
Okay, you were a consultant on Zack Snyder's Watchmen film.
Yes.
And
I'm happy to talk about that. Yeah.
And, Snyder is now also the archetype behind kind of like the DC DC film
Universe, yeah.
and stuff. Do you think that with the new Watchmen books and stuff, and the Watchmen characters obviously going on new writers going on, that we could see an expansion of the Watchmen's universe with Snyder behind it? And as someone who's worked with him, do you think he's the filmmaker who could really do it justice?
Well, I think Zack Snyder, or Zack as I call him, is a very talented filmmaker, and I thought what he did with Watchmen was about as good as anybody could have expected to do. And he put a lot of time into it, a lot of passion. He had complete understanding of the material he was dealing with, and I was really happy with that movie. It's a flawed movie, nothing's perfect, but I really thought they gave it the real proper try. I feel that what's happening now with the DC characters in film, to my mind, is going in the wrong direction. I did a panel earlier on where I was talking about films that had influenced me. What Marvel seem to have done is take their characters with their dark side and their light side and their humour and their pathos and their human emotion. And they've actually had a long vision of what they're going to do. And they put together films that are really entertaining, that are exciting, that do have threat and jeopardy, but have humour and a human quality to them.
And a sense of hope as well.
And a sense of hope. But I feel that what DC has done, particularly with the Superman versus Batman movie, is they really have taken a misstep on it. I mean, I wrote a comic book called World's Finest, which was Superman versus Batman. And what I honed in on, and I'm not saying this is the only take, but it might have helped, was, you know, you've got Batman, who is a dark, hidden creature who lives in a dark, evil city, whose antagonist is a brightly coloured clown. You've got Superman, who is a brightly coloured figure. He's yang, if you like, to Batman's yin. He lives in a bright, hopeful city, but with a villain, with an opponent who is a dark, grey, scheming businessman. So the whole universe is a completely complementary.
And then you've got Batman, who's also his nemesis is the bright-coloured clown. So
Clown,
it's
yeah.
like
So it's a complete.
and
And when I wrote my story, I got a lot of mileage out of just crossing those over, and it turned out that Luthor went to Gotham and the Joker came to Metropolis, and the Joker wanted to black out Metropolis, and Luthor wanted to set Gotham on fire. So to me, if you're doing Superman versus Batman, the first thing which is implied by the verses is there has to be a difference. And I think that where the latest film suffered was because they were just both these dark, opaque, angsty creatures. I thought, though, I would have to say that Ben Affleck's Batman was brilliant. I thought if he'd been in a Batman film on his own. I also think DC sort of lost their nerve, because Superman versus Batman, which is basically Frank Miller's Dark Knight story, is enough for a movie. Without putting Doomsday in it, which is another complete Superman movie, without shoehorning the Flash and the Cyborg and without Wonder Woman, she's a movie in her own right. You know, as I say, I'm perhaps at the moment I'm less than 100% thrilled about DC, but I wouldn't want to beat on everybody, and I certainly am not coming down on Zack, but to my taste, they kind of missed the trick there. I think also Marvel have been very bold that they introduced the characters slowly. So when they put them all in the movie together, it gave me that same thrill as I had with a kid when they put all their characters into the Avengers. Wow, they're all in one comic. And the latest Captain America movie, you know, the Civil War, the bit where the two teams run towards each other with all their powers blazing, was just, oh yeah, this is what comics are about. So I think Marvel have done it with verve and wit, and DC have kind of missed out on that.
Oh, wow. Oh, sorry, I was going to... Go. Ladies first.
Yeah, you haven't had a question yet. Yeah, go on. Go, shut up.
I will.
So I was with Charles Cecile this morning, and we had a little conversation about various things, and your name popped up.
Good.
And because I know you're going to go see him later.
I am. I'm having lunch with him, so I knew you must have said something nice about me for once.
But we were talking with Charles about VR and technology and the future of that technology. But I'm curious to understand from your perspective what your take is on this whole kind of new evolution for comics and for digital motion comics, and where you feel that's going, and what the difficulties are for new entrants into this industry who now have to understand the techniques of traditional comic design and creation, but also need to understand and get their head around all this new emergent technology as well, and the kind of this almost shift into VR and AR and all this other kind of stuff that's happening as well.
Well, I'm involved with a couple of companies. One of them's called Madefire,
Yes.
and they do what they call motion books. These things haven't got names, and the names aren't right, but they're basically comics you can read on your iPad or your Android device, which do everything that comics do and are a genuine reading experience. That to me is the important and significant difference. That comics are a reading experience. Animation is a spectator experience. Yes. So I'm interested in telling stories that the reader reads. Whether things are moving, whether there's sound, doesn't matter, but it's got to be a reader-led experience. So with Madefire, that's what we're doing. And it does free you up to do lots of things. The first script I wrote for a Madefire comic, I started typing page 1, panel 1, and I thought, no, there are no pages. There are no panels, really. And you find you get into the whole thing because with a comic book, you actually cut from picture to picture. But with a motion book, you can dissolve, you can fade, you can also decide, do the balloons come in first, or the image come in first, or balloon, image, balloon, image, balloon, 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 image. You can also control reveals. In a comic book, a reveal has got to be on a page turn, because otherwise when they're looking at the spread, they say, that doesn't apply. So it's a whole new grammar of telling stories, but it is the same problems. It is using words and using images in a complementary way to tell an involving story. So that's it as far as Madefire and motion books, motion comics are concerned. The other company I'm involved with is called Magic Leap, and they are going to be massive. They're very much under the radar at the moment. Google invested nearly $5.5 million in them. The Far East, Alibaba and so on, invested more than that. So they've already had investments of over $1 billion. And their technology is, again, what do you call it? It's not virtual reality, it's not augmented reality. Mixed reality. And I've had a couple of demos of it, and it is mind-blowing. I mean, I can sit here and it's smoke and mirrors, snake or so, and say, it's the best thing ever. Believe me, it will blow you away. It will blow you away because it doesn't look like a special effect. It doesn't look phony. It's far superior technology to Oculus Rift and the other things which put a flat screen in front of you. So I'm a creative consultant with them because amongst the things they're interested in is obviously the technology and the applications, but they're also interested in intellectual property. Yes. And they see a way, and I see a way, that you can actually have drawn and written reading experiences wearing one of these headsets. You can read comics. You can be inside the comic.
Yes.
You can control it. You can look around what's going on. So
on that basis, do you see this shift of you becoming less the storyteller and the artist and more the director almost? In a sense?
I suppose that's true to a certain extent. I mean, as an artist of a comic book, in a sense, you are the director and the costumier and the set designer and the action choreographer anyway. So and I mean, obviously, to produce anything which at all looks to replicate or suggest reality, there's a lot of work to be done, much more than drawing on a flat page. But I still think the basic idea of an experience that you do at your own pace, and of you being very closely connected to the author of it. In other words, not like an electronic arts game where there's hundreds of people working on it, there's levels of management, everything goes to committee, everything has to be financed. You're still doing something which is the digital equivalent of sitting in a room on your own, drawing on a piece of paper. And you've got that direct head-to-head thing. So although things are changing a lot, and I love technology, I've always been an early adopter of things, and I find it tremendously thrilling. And also after having done comics for God knows how many decades. It's great to have a whole new set of problems and a whole new set, and to make contact with a whole new sets of people.
Did you kind of find that you naturally knew these new storytelling techniques, or did you have to go to somebody and ask any kind of questions to help?
No, well, not really. We're sort of making it up as we go along. It is like a new frontier. You're making your own map, and obviously what's interesting as well is that I went to a conference about motion comics, not the full VR thing. And there was a panel of us there, and it was everything from comicsology, which it's just a page turn, just a slideshow, through Madefire, which is that but augmented quite a lot, to something like there's a thing called Anomaly, where it's a book, but if you scan it with your phone, 3D figures stand up, which is right at the other somewhat gimmicky end of things. So there's this whole range of things, and I think it's still settling down. And I don't think Oculus is going to win the VR battle, but it is the Wild West at the moment.
It's the Tesla the thing. It may have made that first step, but there's other companies that will do it better, cheaper, and
the Vive is the one that everyone's going for.
Yeah, Vive and also Microsoft have got a thing called Morpheus, is it? Is it Microsoft, or is that
No,
Sony?
Morpheus doesn't exist anymore. It's the PlayStation VR.
A PlayStation VR, but
Formerly Morpheus.
there was Morpheus, but
Google Daydream is what you're looking for.
But take it from me, the Magic Leap technology, which is essentially what somebody's paid $1.3 billion for. Yeah. It's a particular aspect of it. It's a particular technical part of it.
They need to get it down. The size has got to come down first.
Yeah.
Until they do that, it's not.
Well, that's true. Well, I understand miniaturization isn't a huge problem. Miniaturization can be done, but it's weird.
For Magic Leap, it's still a problem.
Magic Leap isn't there yet, but when it gets there,
it'll be.
It will be.
With the new tech. Okay.
I'm really sorry, I have to.
Fair enough.
Okay, well, all right then. Okay, I was going to say.
The other panel now.
I was going to say one more question, but then.
It's just a name question. Really
Yes,
quickly.
Alan Moore.
You said that your tenure as poet laureate is going to end in 7 months. Is there an up and coming British comic book star writer artist that you think could be the next poet laureate?
No, I'm going to have to say no comments there, because I do know who it's going to be, and if I respond to your question in any way at all, but good try. You're a good try.